Welcome to the 129th season of the Canadian Club Toronto, Canada's podium. For over a century, this stage has united visionaries and leaders from politics, business, community, and the arts to share insights on the most pressing issues of our time. And with Canada in a pivotal moment, it's more important than ever that we come together.
We've been having important discussions and debates around this podium in this country for well over a century. I call this a historic podium of record.
Our club's always been a forum for visionaries, public figures, and decision makers to command attention to the issues of our time.
The Canadian Club is one of the most important podiums anywhere in the world that a Canadian can speak to, tell Canadians what it is that they think, develop those thoughts. And so I want to thank you for that very, very much.
Please join me in thanking our esteemed panelists today.
Through our programs and events, including our youth and young leaders programs, our diversity partnerships, our joint events, and our media and social media opportunities, we offer you access to dynamic political, social, and business figures from abroad and right here at home.
The platform from which the eloquence of Canada has flowed all of that time, whether it be business, education, politics, sports, arts, and culture. If someone wants to say something to Canadians about this country and about the future of this country, this is the venue you choose.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome back, and a warm welcome to those joining us online at canadianclub.org. My name is Shazanne Chu, President of Canadian Club Toronto, and your host for today. Canada stands at a pivotal juncture. Our economy, our institutions, and our global alliances are being tested. From regional and industrial uncertainty to international conflict, and of course, the actions of our neighbor down south. This is an essential moment to reflect, strategize, and chart the path ahead. We are honored to present today's conversation in partnership with The Logic, Canada's leading business and tech publication. It's been really wonderful to work with them. Today's conversation is made possible thanks to our generous sponsors, EY and Scotiabank. Thank you for your continued partnership. And to our season sponsor, the Canadian Bankers Association, and our official airline sponsor, Air Canada, thank you. And to Canada's Forest Trust, our nature partner, who helps us reduce our carbon footprint by planting a smart forest in our honor. Thank you. We're also delighted to welcome students for today from the University of Toronto's Rotman School of Management. Welcome. And before we begin, let me take a moment to remind you all to visit our website, canadianclub.org, for upcoming events and on-demand content. If you're not a member already, we encourage you to join. And we also invite you to share today's event on social media. It helps us spread the word about these important conversations. Now, I'm sure you'll have questions for our esteemed panelists, so please use the Q&A cards on your tables. Raise your hand when you're ready, and our team will collect them to share with today's moderator. And for those of you joining us online, please click the Submit a Question button on the right side of your screen. We'll be looking for those as well. And now, please join me in welcoming our partner in today's event, David Skok, CEO and Editor-in-Chief of The Logic, to the podium to offer a few remarks and introduce today's panel.
Thank you, Shazanne, and thank you all for being here. What a way to kick off the year. We are absolutely delighted at The Logic to be partnering with the Canadian Club in its 49th year of this distinguished and proud event. We've actually been partnering with the Canadian Club since about 2019 in an unofficial capacity, so this is a wonderful evolution to our relationship with the club. For those that don't know, what the Logic is. The Logic is, as Shazan mentioned, Canada's business and tech newsroom. We were founded in 2018. We now have a team of 32 people with 5 bureaus across the country of reporters doing actual reporting. We started the company and the organization with 3 goals. The first goal was, like many of you, to make Canada a better place to live and work, but doing that by facilitating the hard conversations that we know we need to have as a country. And certainly in the intervening time, we've recognized that those conversations have gained steam. The second reason we started The Logic was to put journalism and journalists at the center of our news organization. For a while, that seemed antithetical to running a successful media company, but we have proven and continue to prove that that is actually a viable path, and one that is driven by human-powered, human-centric reporting, which in the year 2026, I feel I need to reiterate with the advent of artificial intelligence. And the third reason we started The Logic was to light a path for hopefully other media organizations to follow. We believe optimistically in the future of journalism. We believe optimistically in the future of truth, and as an antidote to misinformation. And every day we fight through our journalism and through our partnerships with so many of you in this room to make that become a reality. Around the room, thank you. Around the room today, you will see many of our journalists and teams sporting lapels from The Logic. Please go say hi, interact with them. They are delighted to meet you and to be here as well as a partner. Well, 12 months is a long time, and a lot can happen in 12 months. This time last year, the Liberal Party, the federal government at the time, was in a free fall. I think Justin Trudeau had just announced he was stepping down by the time this event took place. Donald Trump had not really mentioned tariffs as more than a hypothetical, and that feels like a long time ago. And perhaps most importantly for all of us, Vladimir Guerrero had not signed with the Blue Jays yet. We didn't know how that would turn out, but sure enough, a lot can happen in 12 months, and a lot happened for the Blue Jays, for Canada, and for the world. And I am the newbie, the neophyte on this group. There's a bunch of distinguished panelists who will be joining me on stage who will give their predictions, even though we all hate predictions, for what will happen in 2026 and what we should all be thinking about. It is my great pleasure to bring them up to the podium for all of you. I'll keep the introductions short because we know them all so well. First up, Amanda Lang, the senior business correspondent for CTV News, who also has a terrific Substack, I might add, and I highly recommend you all subscribe. Kevin Carmichael, economics columnist and editor-at-large at The Logic. We are so thrilled and delighted to get to read his words in our publication every Saturday and other days as well. Jean-Francois Perrault, the chief economist at Scotiabank. And Dennis Mitchell, the CEO and CIO at Starlight Capital. Please welcome to the stage. Thank you all for being here. I'll give you a second to get all set up. Kevin, I'll start with a comment or a pull from something you wrote earlier this week, which I thought was a good primer for us to get going here. You wrote in a column, geopolitics is now the primary driver of economic outcomes. Everybody on the stage thinks about economics. Obviously, Venezuela earlier this week set a tone that maybe geopolitics matters to economics as well. I'm curious, and I will go to all of you for this because I think it's a good high-level, broad start for the conversation. When you think about geopolitics right now, when you think about economics and how the interplay happens, Amanda, to you first. What are you thinking about as we go into 2026?
I mean, I think the assumption is absolutely correct, right? And we've known this. This was true in 2025, that events beyond our control, beyond our border, would deeply shape our economy and our lives. There's another aspect to it. I mean, somebody just said, how are you doing? I'm personally doing great. The world might be ending. So which answer do you want? And it's in that context that I think if you're a business or a prime minister and you're trying to actually make decisions, you kind of need to keep it on the micro, I think. But you can't ignore the macro. You can't ignore the fact that we will have to respond to events. We just don't know what they are. Having said that, I do think there are a bunch of things that we can do. This is way beyond my scope, but politically, diplomatically, that are proactive, and we are, and we should do them. Economically, it's more reactive, would be my fear, is that there's going to be a lot of figuring out how to respond to things that happen as they come.
JF, your CEO, Scott Thompson, spoke yesterday and said that what was happening in Venezuela, the U.S.'s renewed influence in Latin America is actually good for the world and good for Scotiabank, which still has, despite pulling out of Venezuela, still has the largest exposure in the region. So how are you thinking about things?
So it's easy to focus on Trump as the disruptor, as the force that is forcing us all to think about things differently, behave differently, and to worry about different things. And that's true in South America, it's true in Europe, it's true in China, it's true all over the world. And that, of course, is the theme of the year, and will be the theme for the next 3 years as we figure out what he wants to do, and as he does what he says he wants to do, or doesn't do what he says he wants to do. But the reality is, if you think of the response to Trump around the world, so it's not just a Latin American thing, it's not just a European thing, it's a Canadian thing too, is that he's he's shaking us out of our torpor. He is forcing us to think about things differently. He's forcing us, particularly in Canada, to be much more thoughtful about investment, much more thoughtful about productivity, much more thoughtful about the regulatory environment. And this is true in Mexico, it's true in South American countries, it's true in Europe, it's true in Asia. So in a sense, even though he's kind of this force of, I don't want to use this force. He is triggering a set of reforms and rethinking across the world that is probably helpful to the countries in which these rethinks are occurring. We are, for instance, in Canada, we are almost certainly going to have higher investment at some point in time because of the things that we are doing now that we would not have done had President Trump not been as aggressive with respect to us or other countries. So, we can focus on the downside, but there is, the kick in the butt that we've all gotten is motivated some change, which I think is very, very welcome.
Kevin, is there enough time to make these changes, to get things aligned before? I mean, obviously Greenland is next on the list here, as we're hearing. You wrote this week that Canada is part of a new world order. Do we have enough time to balance these things, to get ahead of it?
Okay, so look, let me pick up on the new world order bit. There is a new world order. I think Canada's problem is that we're not part of it. And so let's go back to what I wrote about geoeconomics. Geoeconomics is something that we forgot about for a generation or two. We thought history was over. We thought that the West had won, that the Russians were going to follow along, the Chinese were going to embrace the way we went about doing things, and that the future would be essentially utopia. That's a pretty easy world to live in. You don't have to try very hard. Just kind of roll along with it, right? Geoeconomics is different. So let me, and you roll along in a way that you think, okay, well, economics just sort of works. We can function on efficiency. We can function on, making sure we spread as much welfare to as broadly as possible. Geoeconomics is something else. Geoeconomics is great power politics. Great power politics, of course, is like the 3 or 4 big giants of the world dictating on how they want to do things around a security mindset, which is what is driving all of these political decisions in the U.S., in Russia, and in China. That's a totally different world for a smaller economy like Canada. Suddenly, the U.S. isn't our friend. For the U.S. now, we're a vulnerability. We're a northern vulnerability. They have to think about what's going on up there in the Arctic because those Canadians haven't been investing properly in their economy or their defense for generations. So we got to take it ourselves. Well, we'll go in there and do it ourselves. That is the risk. That's the thing that I think that Canadians have to think about, and that's why we have to start to think differently about how we orient our economy. Because we just don't get to ride on the coattails of the U.S. anymore, or before the U.S., the British Empire. We've got to decide whether we want to, I hate to say it, be a 51st or 52nd and 53rd state, or be something that has a certain amount of resilience and independence from what's going on in that sort of massive struggle between those three superpowers. And the way you do that is you become less of a worry for the one that's sitting next door. That means we have to plow as much money as we can into defense to show the Americans that they don't need to worry about any sort of threat through the Arctic. And if we can convince the Americans of that, it seems to me that we'll be able to carve out something of an independent state of affairs. But if we don't do that, they're going to come for whatever they think they need.
Okay, so that sounds great in theory, respectfully. But now you have a prime minister who's off to meet President Xi next week.
Yeah.
To hopefully, for his perspective, try to drum up more business with China. Then he's off to Doha, then he's off to Davos. So I assume Trump's not going to love that kind of a relationship, Dennis?
Well, I agree with almost everything Kevin has said, with one exception. Again, you're talking about Donald Trump, who isn't necessarily the most rational human being and isn't necessarily convinced by facts, reality, and data, right? So I would almost say that I agree with JF. He has been the kick in the butt that we need to invest more, whether it's in the military, whether it's in major projects, whether it's, you take your pick. But more investment in Canada is a welcome thing and a welcome side effect. I don't think that was Trump's intention, but that's a welcome side effect. The problem we have, though, is that the guardrails from Administration 1 are gone. And so when he opines about, after snatching the leader of Venezuela, and we can debate whether that's a good or a bad thing, doesn't matter, it happened. When he starts to opine upon taking military action to absorb Greenland, we're a lot closer, we got more people, we got more stuff, and Kevin has articulated some of the challenges the United States might have with us and on our underinvestment and underfocus on the Arctic. Doesn't necessarily matter if we actually take action and do things, because someone like Donald Trump is not going to, it doesn't matter. If he fixates on this and decides this is what he wants to do, he's going to do it. Now, the encouraging thing is that we seem to still have congressional Republicans in the House and the Senate who seem interested in curbing his more baser and more toxic ambitions, right? So they don't want to go to war with NATO over Greenland. They don't want to go to war with Denmark and by proxy NATO over Greenland. So it stands to reason they probably don't want to go to war with NATO over Canada either. But as we start to see more deterioration in the people who serve in Congress, and you're seeing it, you've seen it in the House, and you're now starting to see it in the Senate. I love college football, but Tommy Tuberville probably shouldn't be a senator, right? So as we start to see more and more deterioration in the quality of people who are filling these important roles, it becomes more and more possible for someone like Donald Trump to, in fact, come north and take all the good stuff that we have. So I agree with both of you that all of the things that we're doing are a positive. And if the United States had a rational president who looked at actual reality and data and facts, that would resonate. But at the end of the day, unless there is someone to curb his ambitions, that may not be or it may not result in the impact and the effects that we think it would normally have.
Amanda, I want to come back to you. So this is all, broad and macroeconomics and geopolitics. At the end of the day, though, it relies on private companies putting capital into these investments. Is that going to happen this year?
So I think we do have, so let me actually just say the most dire scenarios, to that point of it feels as though we have no control over massive events that could harm us greatly. As my old friend Kevin O'Leary used to say to me, the problem with the end of the world trade is it only works once. So planning for a US invasion is a bad strategy. Planning for policies that benefit us and might actually appease the US, good strategy. So there's that line we can walk where, to the point that's being made here, is we have an opportunity to do things we should do anyway that are good for this country. I think you saw the framework of that in the most recent budget. Kevin and I disagreed slightly on how positive we were about it, was my take on his analysis. I liked it. It felt to me like an investment budget. It felt to me like a signal to global capital that this is a safe place, and we're open for business, and we want your business. Will it come? It'll take 2 to 3 years. Will it come this year? Maybe. Some of it should come this year if we're actually going to start to see the fruits of some of these major projects. Time will tell. I would have been happier to see a little bit more inventiveness on that it was attached to that framework. But I do think we've seen business confidence at such a low level now for, 4 or 5 years. Business spending on hold through the first Trump administration never really came back. We do need some way to signal to Canadian business that now is the time to do it. And I think some of it just speaks to attitude and tone. Like, we do need to stop worrying too much about what Donald Trump is doing and start thinking more about what we can do and having that conversation so businesses do feel they want to, right? Businesses want to invest. Otherwise, they would go do something else. We just need the right attitude, I think.
One of the things you hear from businesses is, keep going, Canada, but look at what the U.S. has done from a deregulation perspective. They made it incredibly attractive, albeit slightly unpredictable, but incredibly attractive for capital to go there. So have we done enough here?
I mean, I would actually take issue with that because some of the biggest capital attraction they did was the IRA, right? It was Biden's super heavy-handed, government incentive-driven green tax incentives. Government can play a huge role. Additional kind of incentives from government can be a big part of it. That may not be the right way to go. It might not be the way we want to go. But I do think thinking about seizing this moment and not letting it pass us by is the right attitude. I'd be curious to know what we think are the right policies to encourage it.
Anybody want to jump in there?
I can hop in. Probably JF and Dennis have interesting things to say about this too. So to Amanda's point about our slightly same but different take on the budget, I liked it too. But what I disliked, because it was missing the answer to your question, which was, have we done enough? And we haven't. So what I saw in the budget was a lot of the right things. It got us a lot of the way down the road. But it failed to take advantage of the momentum that I think was in place at that time to go all the way. And all the way means tackling tax policy for once and for all, tackling regulatory policy once and for all. Like, we know these things are holding back the economy and a barrier to the investment that is obviously necessary to take full advantage of this moment. And so I'm not. Look, there's going to be some investment in Canada for sure. Like, the government on its own is plowing enough money into the economy and inviting others to join along that there are going to be people out there that take advantage of that. So we're going to start to move the needle. But we needed just to nudge the needle a few years ago. We've got to go to the moon now, right? So to do that, to really get the private sector behind what's happening here, we've got to tackle tax issues. We've got to tackle the regulatory issues that slow so much investment down, and we've got to get serious about competition. Those sorts of things will actually start to put us on a path for sustainable growth. I think we've been too focused on sort of episodic growth. Let's plow a bunch of money into the economy, hope people follow along. Let's cut taxes, hope people follow along. It hasn't really worked. It's got us, to the point we've made earlier, like, it's got us to a pretty comfortable way of living, but it hasn't turned us into a proper world-beating economy, in my opinion.
Dennis, as someone who does invest money, are you outflowing out of the country? Are you investing here? What are you looking at?
Actually, I just want to finish my earlier thought. I agree with you. The end of the world trade it only works once, and it's not a good idea. They're not coming for us today, so we have time. So I didn't want anyone to take away the idea that I'm sitting here waiting for the Americans to take my house. That's not how I think. In terms of investing, our firm is focused on real assets, real estate and infrastructure, and dividend-paying equities. We do that on a global basis. I would say that almost every portfolio manager has a home market bias, whether it's just lag of information, relationships, what you're familiar with. So we tend to allocate a significant amount of capital within Canadian businesses, right? But just to follow up on what Kevin said, I agree in terms of deregulation and attracting investment, but what I would add to that is that we also need to diversify the Canadian economy, right? It can't simply just be focused on energy and housing, right? So when we talk about attracting investment, healthcare and technology are the two sectors globally that inspire the most innovation, that drive returns and capital allocation. We need to be focused, we need to be intentional about the capital that we attract. And it needs to be it needs to have scale, it needs to have duration, and it needs to have focus such that we evolve and expand the Canadian economy. It can't simply just be bringing more people in so we can build more houses so that we all have a comfortable place to live. We need to diversify beyond that.
Okay, so I just want to push you a little bit harder on this. Are you bullish on Canada as an investment, or are you looking for follow-on capital from others to support you, pension funds, federal government? What do you need in order to invest in this country?
Right, so when you talk about investing, it's always relative, right? Relative and risk adjusted. So when you're looking at allocating capital to Canada, there are only two types of people in this world who don't like Canada: Donald Trump and Canadians, right? The rest of the world loves Canada for all of the foundational things that we provide, right? Separation of church and state, real property laws, the excellent education system. Believe it or not, we have a fantastic healthcare system. We just don't have enough people in it, and we have underinvested in it. So when you're looking at investing in Canada, I don't need anybody else, right? Like, if I can find good risk-adjusted opportunities within Canada, I will do so. Right? And we do invest both in publicly traded equities and in private assets within the Canadian market. But for me, we're diligencing a student housing development opportunity in the United States. If there was a similar opportunity in Canada, we'd diligence that, but there isn't. Right? So that's part of the comments that I was making earlier about diversifying the economy. If I want to find a multifamily development strategy, there's 30 guys doing that, right? I probably got 3 emails about that in my phone since we started this panel. Right? So that's what I mean about diversifying the economy. It would be wonderful to have a data center strategy or a healthcare strategy within Canada to allocate to. But we do that in the US because that's where the opportunities are.
Amanda, and then I'll come to you, Jeff.
Yeah, sorry, Jeff. I want to just throw one thought in there. As we talk about capital, and global capital is great, I guess. Is it? I don't know. Sometimes it means you're losing your IP. It means the ownership of your best companies now resides somewhere else. So capital is important. We have a lot of it in Canada. To me, it's more of a reallocation of capital. And when I say businesses aren't investing, it's not that they're sitting on their cash. They need to borrow often to invest. So, Kevin's alluded to, and he said it actually recently, to the two key things you could do, if you had a majority government, I don't know. I was heartened that there was nothing about tax reform in the budget because it suggests that they're at work on something important. There was nothing. So how could there be nothing? Well, because hopefully they're coming with something big. You've said a Royal Commission on tax reform. We need a massive, if you review our tax base completely and then review our competition laws, those two things unleash capital. Right here, capital that already resides here. Our banks have it, our businesses have it, we have it. So it's not always international capital you need to attract. It's actually making the capital work better inside this economy.
Jeff?
Yeah, I think of the budget as a down payment, as an indication of the direction the government's going to follow. You got to think that, the Prime Minister was elected May, I think it was, when the election was. So, a few months later, he comes up with a budget that, tries to set a new course for the economy. There are so many things to fix and try to improve upon that it was completely unrealistic to think that it was all going to get done in this budget. So I think of the budget kind of as a statement of intent of, them understanding the problem, clearly focused on investment, knowing that there's a lot more that goes into that than just what's in the budget. And you've heard them in the budget, whether you believe it or not. I don't believe it, but hopefully they're right. The Prime Minister said, we anticipate that over the next 5 years, we're going to raise $1 trillion of investment relative to the path that we've been on. So that, that's not, the budget doesn't do that, but it's reflective of the ambition, which I think is great. Now, in terms of kind of the question that Dennis was getting at, and are you bullish or not on Canada? It's all, investments are always relative, so you got to figure out are you going to put money there or elsewhere. But what I very much like about Canada, when you compare it to the U.S., for instance, right now, is that there is a lot of thoughtfulness going into understanding what ails our economy and how to fix that. It's not willy-nilly, we're going to do this and that, and we're going to raise taxes or we're going to cut tariffs or announce something over the weekend. It's a methodical, that's my French coming out, a methodical kind of dissection of what needs to be done. And the reality in Canada, which perversely benefits us in the current environment, is our productivity has been so low for so long, investment's been so low for so long, that we are very far from the frontier in terms of the innovative space and what we can get our companies to do, whereas the Americans are at the frontier. So for them to keep pushing forward on productivity, for them to keep doing better, they're fighting against themselves, which is a good problem to have. We're here and they're there. So there's a lot that we can do that's probably pretty simple. Going back to basic stuff, focused on the resource economy, focused on energy, focused on ports, on infrastructure, like reasonably simple things for a normal economy that will move the needle very significantly in terms of our economic direction and productivity and profitability. So as I think about the next year, for instance, and I look at the policy settings on both sides, sure, the Americans are deregulating. Sure, they're cutting taxes. I don't know if that's enough to compete against a country like ours where we're, turning the dial in a very thoughtful and meaningful way in terms of the things that we know are going to drive investment. Now, whether that works or not, I mean, it's to be seen. I think you saw some of that reflected in, for instance, equity returns in 2025 in Canada versus the US or other countries versus the US. There's just this sense that, okay, finally some of these countries are starting to get it. And maybe they'll outperform, possibly, the US at some point.
Jeff, just to pick up on that, I'll ask you a follow-up question, which is from our audience here. And for those watching online, please keep sending your questions in. It is, what about debt? Have we stopped caring about debt?
What about debt? Listen, I think obviously, the fiscal plan comes with large deficits. There's no question about that. I would say that for me, there is a very significant difference in fiscal policy that results in debt that is focused on driving investment versus one that is not. And clearly, that's what this government's trying to do. Now, if you don't get any investment out of the deficits, that's an issue. But that's not been the case over the last 10 years. It's been very significant deficits for a range of things, some of which are perfectly valid, but they were more focused on the social side of things that are whose link to productivity, whose link to prosperity, economic prosperity is very different than investment. So yeah, we're going to run bigger deficits for a little while, hopefully. Hopefully that triggers a significant reset in investment, and that puts us on a better path. And that I'm okay with. Now, if that doesn't happen, then it was a mistake.
We've kind of skimmed the productivity question here, and everybody's kind of talked about it a little bit. I want to dive into it, though, through the lens of AI. For the past 3 years or longer, every panel I've done has talked about AI as a way to boost productivity. For those of you that actually study this stuff, are we seeing that impact yet? Are companies using AI to increase productivity? And if so, are they doing it through efficiency gains, i.e. getting rid of workers? Or are they doing it through new market creation? Anybody want to jump at that?
I would say, I'm sure Kevin has seen some, I would say what I've seen, and it's early, is that businesses that have made the investments in AI are sort of in the, why did we do that phase? It's at the seeding stage. It takes a while to actually, and there's two categories of businesses, right? There's the business that needs to really understand its processes really well. AI works beautifully for that business. Not all businesses do, and there's not always an easy application. Those ones actually are the winners. That's where you're going to see massive gains in margin and and in excellence. But those tend to be kind of small. So does that level up to our productivity data? I don't know. We haven't seen the mass use case that would say this is going to move the needle on productivity, but I think we know it all gets us there. The only thing I would say is, of course, as we know, productivity is a really super weird data point. We know it matters. I was saying to Kevin, I may have seen the US productivity data this morning, but it was up 5% in the recent period because wages and hours worked fell off a cliff. Is that good? Doesn't sound good to me. Doesn't sound good to me if you're those workers. So we know AI will remove jobs. Is that what we want?
Kevin, you've been reporting out a series now for the past 12 months called Resilient Canada. We made a pledge not to use the word productivity. We just were done with it, so we came up with Resilient Canada. I'm not sure if it has the same thought to it. Is this a panacea, AI?
Panacea. Whoa. You know what? I'll say yes. The same way, sort of the IT and computer revolution was a panacea to productivity for at least a little while in the 90s, early 2000s. But we're not going to see it right away. We might never see it. We just might suddenly arrive and be fundamental to our lives and the way we go about doing work. My thinking about AI in the short term is similar to what Amanda just put out there. I mean, I was struck by a conversation I had with a friend and someone who's essentially in charge of AI for a significant global tech company, talking about this with me over the summer. He said, look, what you're going to see first is companies are going to rush to investing in AI because it's the thing to do. And then they're going to have to go back to their boards and explain why they spent all this money on AI. And the only way they're going to be able to justify that expense in the short term is by firing people or not hiring people, wherever it might be. So you're going to see this kind of ceiling on employment and probably some more layoffs and that sort of thing related to this. That's going to create kind of a negative story around AI, which could perhaps feed into the whole K-shaped economy and inequality element to the poly crisis that's surrounded us for several years and is even more present now. So it could be rough, frankly, in the short term. In the long term, yeah, it does feel like it has to be some kind of productivity enhancer, like we all are going to be Tony Stark one day, it seems like, right? But probably not this year, probably not the next couple of years. I don't know if you want to plug me into an AI, David, and see how many columns I can grind out in an enhanced way. But yeah, I think so. It feels like, bottom line, it feels like yes, one day, but that day is probably a little while off.
Okay, we got a lot of topics to cover here, people. So I'm going to fly through a bunch more. I'll just say interest rates. Dennis, JF, what's going to happen to interest rates?
For you to start that. Just agree, so have at it.
You can agree
just
with
agree,
me?
just have at it.
So we have a bit of a different perspective on rates than a lot of folks out there. When you look at Canada, for instance, inflation is still a bit of an issue. Not a huge issue, but still a bit of an issue. Productivity growth is low, wage growth is high. The economy is not operating on all cylinders by any stretch of the imagination, but Canadians believe inflation is going to be high. And I think that really limits the Bank of Canada's ability to cut rates further. And in fact, we think the Bank of Canada, over the course of next year, hopefully in the second half of next year, has to raise rates a little bit, just to try and maintain inflation around 2% and to take out a source of uncertainty or keep one source of uncertainty reasonably controlled in Canada. But there are not many people that think that way, so.
Anybody else? Yep.
I agree.
Good, somebody else thinks that way, good.
Fortunately, I do agree. And investing in real estate and infrastructure, both interest rate sensitive industries and businesses globally. So we do pay quite a bit of attention to this. So I would agree. I think that beyond tariffs, you just have a global economy that I think I've heard this term a million times now. It's got a higher resting heart rate for when it comes to inflation. So it's not necessarily 2%. And then the question becomes, do central bankers around the world accept 3% as the new 2%? Or do they raise rates in order to continue to try and target 2%? But I do think inflation is going to be higher going forward than it has been historically. And can I just tag on to that AI comment for just one sec? So we had that call 2 days ago and we were talking about AI. So I went back and talked to the teams in the departments. In the investment team, we use AI to do diligence. We are not hiring another research analyst this year, so that's about $150K all in, because we don't need to, because of our utilization of AI. The finance team has saved about $300,000 this year using AI to craft tax memos. So that is money that we keep and Blake's doesn't get. So if there's anyone in the audience from Blake's.
But you still have M dashes though, right?
Sorry?
M dashes.
Still M dashes.
Yeah.
Sales and marketing have been using AI to craft emails, marketing comments to actually target who in our database that we are going to send invitations to our real estate webcast, real assets, global growth, dividend growth. So we have used AI broadly across the organization, and we are getting to the point where instead of using it like Google, right? Like tell me about which firms were privatized in 2022. we are now using it in a generative capacity to say, like, write me an investment memo on this investment opportunity using this deck and these reports, right? So I would say we are saving a significant amount of capital, and that goes right into the bonus pool. So
I just want to say on the interest rate question, I'll leave it to JF to actually make forecasts. But just a reminder, back to your debt point, the Bank of Canada sets the front end of the curve. Markets set the rest of that curve. And we're a long way from the boys in red suspenders that Chrétien worried about. But the reminder, last time we tackled our deficits in this country, it was not because we were Boy Scouts, it's because global markets said we needed to. It could happen again. So if you care about your mortgage, you should care about deficits.
Okay, another question from the audience. What happened to the enthusiasm about lowering interprovincial trade barriers?
People.
Yeah.
People happened.
Yeah, I mean, I think people and time happened. So one of the benefits of Trump and one of the benefits of, Venezuela or whatever it is he's going to say tomorrow or the day after or a month from now, is that it keeps a little bit of the fire going in terms of these threats. Now, it's not good. Uncertainty is never good. But in a world such as ours, where there are things that we haven't done for a very long time because it was just politically challenging to do, like interprovincial trade barriers, keeping our feet on the fire is a good thing. And unfortunately, on the trade barrier side, there's a lot of enthusiasm earlier last year, as you might have recalled. And there's been some progress, but some backtracking already. Ontario, for instance, is, instituted by Ontario policy. We're going to, kick Crown Royal out of LCBOs because they're moving bottling from Ontario to Quebec. So there already is kind of this confrontation of reality between an ambition on some tricky political stuff that is required to move on interprovincial trade barriers and the economic imperative of doing that for the good of the greater country as opposed to the immediate constituency. So I worry about that. I mean, I think interprovincial trade barriers are going to continue to be a bit of a drag on us, despite the hope that there was this time last year, a little bit later last year. But then any progress is progress, and we have moved a little bit, and that, of course, is to be welcome. But we've probably done as much as we're going to. That piece, David, is missing a political champion, somebody who's willing to go out basically every day and just fight for that issue, not because there's going to be any sort of political payoff down the road, but just because it's the right thing to do. And I think the reason we got as far as we did is because we had that for a second. That was the Prime Minister, and it was something that he and some of the premiers could grab hold of in the sort of the heat of the Trump shock and sort of push that as far as it's gotten. But now the Prime Minister is obviously distracted. He's got more things to do now, and that provincial champion or champions that were there for a second have kind of faded away. So we need someone to step up and just bang heads, keep that issue hot week to week, and we're missing that right now. And I'm with JF. Like, that Canadian complacency is kicking in again, and it got a little hard, so everybody faded back.
Although, to be fair, we treat an issue like this as a simple one at our peril. It was always complex. Some of the regulations were dumb. The width of truck tires across the border, those are the ones you can change because they're dumb. Some of them go to the standards of training for professionals, and people feel very strongly about that. The minute that my Instagram feed started being populated with people warning me that the training of psychologists was going to be degraded because in Nova Scotia it's a different training than Alberta, I thought, yep, here we go. That's an interprovincial trade barrier. It's hard to remove. It takes a decade to see the results once you've removed it.
Same as language issues, right?
Yep.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to try to work this into a housing question, which is one of the things that you hear about is there aren't enough plumbers. There aren't enough electricians to build all the things that we need to build. From a housing perspective, so interprovincial trade and getting rid of some of those criteria and allowing tradespeople to move more freely would help there. Are we going to solve the housing crisis this year? That was a question that I got, so I'm just paraphrasing.
Oh, that's easy.
Yeah.
No. Not even close. Look, one of the things I like about Build Canada Homes is the focus on innovation, right? And investing for, or incenting people to come up with creative solutions to the housing problem. So I think I mentioned this last year on this panel, but Lennar Homes, one of the largest home builders in the United States, actually built a 160-home community in Austin, Texas. They did it with 2 3D printers and 16 people, and it took 2 months, right? Now, Austin, Texas, very different climate from most of Canada, so who knows if that is applicable here. But the idea that you could 3D print homes in various places across this country and then move pools or pockets of, or pods, if you will, of tradespeople from one project to another probably expedites and solves part of the problem. But this has grown to the point where it is a huge problem, and it's going to require, it is a complex problem, and it is going to require a multi-tiered complex solution. Everybody's going to say, like, oh, you know, government building affordable housing is not the solution. Building 300 or, funding 4,000 homes in, Podunk is not the solution. No, it is not. But a house isn't built out of one brick. It's got a couple thousand in it. So if you come up with a whole bunch of solutions that work here, there, the odd few that work nationally, you will eventually chip away at it, right? How do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. So we have to come up with a complex solution to a complex problem. And it's not going to happen Friday morning at 10 a.m. It's probably going to take years of iteration, fits and starts. Some of the stuff we come up with will not work. Some of it will, to varying degrees. Some less, some more. But it is going to take a concerted effort over multiple years to solve this. And it's not going to be a straight line either. The population of Canada declined in Q3, right? 76,000 people. You can point to that as being sort of the fallout of reducing the number of non-permanent workers, I believe it is. I never get the terminology correct exactly. But not all the solutions are going to be creating more housing. Some of the solution is going to be slowing or even reducing the pace of population growth in this country because we have created such a massive problem over decades.
Coming back to interprovincial trade and your point about it needs a champion, one of the reasons there may not be a champion is because there seem to be 5 different economies in this country that all have their own criteria or prioritization. We are in Ontario, Toronto, but Ontario. Ontario driven predominantly by housing and by automotive sector and indirectly steel. The automotive sector and steel are under immense duress right now. To the point where every few months we're hearing about more funding coming from the federal government, coming from the provinces to keep these things afloat. I know there's a lot of work being done in Virginia, in Pittsburgh, in other places from Japanese investors coming in and really boosting the steel industry in the US. So for anybody here, Ontario, let's just talk about Ontario for a second because I think it's the most acute here. In 2026, how does this economy transform itself? Anybody want to take that?
I'm happy to start. The Canadian economy is largely focused on our neighbor to the south. It is a humongous consumer-driven market, and most businesses in Canada are a derivation of how can we help you, sir? What can we do for you? Need steel, need aluminum, need lumber, need oil and gas? Here, take ours. Going forward, the Canadian economy needs to transform into what do we want to be? Right? And so my earlier comments about focusing on technology and healthcare, that would be along the mindset of what do we want to be? And that may attract other customers that are not challenged by our geography and not challenged by the logistics of taking something from Ontario, where everybody lives, out to one of the coasts to then get it out to the rest of the world. So I think a lot of it has to focus on us growing up and the economy evolving beyond just this one big customer down there that we move heaven and earth to serve. We have to figure out what Canada is going to be going forward, invest accordingly, and then embrace new clients and new relationships around the world. So when you talked earlier about Carney building relationships with Xi, I don't envy Carney. This is a tough balancing act between appeasing Trump and making new relationships and new friends. But if the job wasn't hard, it wouldn't pay so well, right?
Amanda, to you, but also just to add on that, CUSMA's up for review starting in July.
Yeah.
Maybe I got that wrong.
No, that's right.
July 1st.
July.
How does that play into this?
So it's actually very tightly tied together because, of course, the auto sector of Ontario is massively important, which is partly why we all imagine that our trading relationship with the US is the most important economy we have. It's not true. Most Canadians don't know that our housing sector is our biggest sector. It's the biggest component of our GDP. And if that doesn't scare you, it should. Our auto industry is massively important. And I keep trying to get a sense from people that they have a plan B. What happens when, not if, when the US decides it no longer needs to ship something across the border 8 times to get an assembled product? That's what we need to figure out. But the good news is that's hugely important for Ontario. I'm not diminishing it. Ontario is hugely important for Canada. That's a problem we need to solve. But it's only one component of our economy. There are many others. Getting a new trade deal with the US is the single most important agenda item we have. It's possible that we won't have one. It's possible that we end up like the UK and we have across the board 10%. We have some sort of new structured relationship with them and we don't have zero tariffs. We should also be thinking about that. But to Dennis's point, new markets is a way to go. But I'll just circle back to me, the two things we need to think about are how we let housing dominate this way. And P.S., we're not going to solve our housing problem unless we acknowledge that we've let it get off the rails by financializing it. And if we do more financializing, it will get worse. And two, how we make our domestic economy stronger. We have a solid domestic economy. So interprovincial trade barriers is one of them. Movement of people easily, another. Those two things alone will help offset some of the pain of that auto sector.
Jeff?
Yeah, I just add a couple things. So one of the consequences of the world that we find ourselves in is that political leaders and their decisions have much more influence now on our way forward than they have in a long time, right? Your leaders are now required to make tough decisions about, okay, am I going to protect this industry? Am I going to give this one up? Am I going to think about regulation differently? Am I going to do all these things that in the past you kind of float and not worry about it too much because the system was stable? The system's unstable now, and leaders have to lead. So there is, I think, a challenge and opportunity in some provinces more than others with respect to how seriously the political leadership thinks of the transformation and what ideas they bring to the table. How open are they to ideas? And Ontario is one of those provinces where obviously we are most impacted by what's going on in the US, some parts of the province much more so than others. So you can think of that as a challenge, but it's also this tremendous opportunity to the extent that businesses have good ideas. I think you've got governments that are like dying to hear from businesses as to what it is that they could do to make things better for them. So I would emphasize that. I mean, for everybody in the room, if you've got a good idea, if you think your business could thrive by doing this versus that, you're going to have a provincial leadership that is going to be responsible for that, and the federal leadership is responsible for that as well. Now, in terms of kind of the background environment on the CUSMA stuff, well, yeah, we're reviewing. Guaranteed that Trump is going to say many times, I'm ripping it up. Like, there's no question. He said that last time around. He said that last time around many, many, many times. And at the end of the day, the deal we got was very similar to what we originally had, so that we go into it expecting some noise around that. But if you look at what's actually happening on the trade side with the Americans, Trump is showing a lot of respect for CUSMA. He's given us still tariff-free access on the majority of things that are going through CUSMA. That's a choice on his part. It's a choice because he understands that changing that has got very significant economic consequences for the Americans. You look at what U.S. industry is saying about CUSMA in the context of American consultations coming up for the renegotiation or the review, and like they are overwhelmingly in favor with some tweaks here and there. When you look at the consequence of Trump's actions on American industry, so look at manufacturing activity in the US, when you look at some of the challenges that are being faced there, a lot of those stem from some of the tariffs that he put on steel and aluminum, which are having outsized, I mean, we worry about them here, they're having very significant broad impacts in the US as opposed to kind of sector-specific impacts here. And he's shown himself over the last several weeks to understand that his tariff policies have created a bit of an affordability issue, and he's scaled back some tariffs on a broad range of things in hopes to try and make life more affordable for Americans. So I look at all that, and it leaves me reasonably optimistic that as we go through 2026, that we'll probably end up in a similar spot on the review. Maybe it gets punted to next year, like we'll see. But there will be a lot of noise around it. I think the political reality is just that Trump needs. There's a limit to how much further he can damage the U.S. economy in the short run, and I think he's starting to understand, despite him never saying that, and never will say that he is causing some issues in some parts of his country.
All right, we only have a few minutes left, so I want to switch gears here a little bit, and I need you all to get very real with me for a second here, okay? I came to this wonderful lunch because I wanted you to make me money. There actually was a question about this, so I'm paraphrasing. It's not just me. Two ways that you can maybe help me make money that go beyond Kuzma, everything else. Number one, I got a business to run. I have to forecast. Forecasting is really hard right now. I just did a budget, I've got it approved by the board, and now I got to throw it all up again. 3 months out, 12 months out, 36 months out. What are you advising clients right now to do? And don't tell me scenario planning, because that's just a cop-out to me, honestly. Like, yeah, sure, plan for anything, but anything can happen. At Scotiabank, what are you doing?
We tell folks to bank on Canada. Like, I do believe that what we're doing now is going to be transformative. It's a question of timing. But we are doing things in a way that we haven't done before, and that will unleash capital. It will unleash some dynamism in the private sector, maybe not as much as we want, but we're looking forward to what is to come, even though we're expecting growth of 1.5 this year. It's not great, but it's just kind of a step again in the right direction. So, don't sell us short, and unfortunately, trust that our leaders understand what needs to be done. And I think what I've seen so far, by and large, is that leaders do understand a lot more than they used to and are willing to act on that. And that, to me, is really encouraging.
So just so I'm clear, if I'm forecasting out my growth rates, are they flat? Are they up? Am I hoarding cash? What am I?
Up. No, to us, the question is, I mean, just a little thought experiment. So I talked about the $1 trillion that the government says, or the Feds say they want to engineer in terms of additional investment over the next 5 years. That seems completely unrealistic, but assume it's partially true. Even if they're only 10% right, instead of $1 trillion, they get an extra $100 billion. That is a massive increase in investment relative to the pace that we've been on. So to me, the guideline is clear. Like, we're going to get a lot more investment. We may not get as much as the Prime Minister would like, but even if they're partially successful, and there's every reason to believe they're going to be partially successful, you're looking at a very significant increase in investment, and therefore a very significant increase in growth over a period of time, and a very significant increase in GDP per capita and standard of living. So it's, is that going to be 3% growth, 2% growth? I don't know, but it's going to be better than what we've experienced.
Okay, I have $100,000 in cash. Let me actually just make sure I read this correctly. I want to time the market to invest. In brackets, I always know it's a bad idea. Close bracket. If you were to invest this money, Amanda, help us out here. What would you put it in? Broad-based ETF for TSX, buy now or wait, bank ETFs, energy sector, telecom? Where are you placing your bets?
I do not give financial advice, professionally nor otherwise. If it were in Canada, it would be Canadian bank stocks. But I'd keep an eye on it because deregulation is coming for you. But if it's the world, it would be the U.S. market. This is going to be a good year for the U.S. market unless they start World War III. I mean, to your point about what businesses should do, I don't advise business either. But I would say, I think I said this last year, keep your circle of worry inside your circle of control. Things you cannot change, you can't strategize around. So think about what you can control and forecast on. And if you're wrong, if you're the cook on the Titanic, just keep cooking.
And watch out for the icebergs. Okay, one more question, rapid fire for all of you. I want one asymmetric bet from all of you. What is the one area of the Canadian economy that is currently mispriced? Where is the pessimism or optimism overblown? Do you want me to start with you?
Sure. Quantum computing.
Overblown or under?
It's not a thing. It doesn't exist. I mean, it might one day, but it's, overblown.
Kevin?
It's going to be unpopular, especially in the newsroom. I think AI is overblown in the Canadian context.
Well, I mean, it's not like I'm pushing AI that aggressively. Dennis?
Well, surprise, surprise, the real estate guy thinks the real estate is undervalued. But people always say to me, if REITs are so cheap, why aren't people buying them? Well, they are. So we kicked off the year with Minto. We had InterRent earlier. We had Dream Residential REIT. So M&A is taking place because REITs are trading at discounts to NAV. And the one investment opportunity, seniors housing. Okay, the population 70 and above is, we're all getting older, literally as we speak. Doesn't matter if GDP growth is +2 or -2, we're all getting older. 10% of the population at 70 or above is in seniors housing. It is one of the few real estate sectors where real estate actually goes obsolete, either through regulation or the passage of time. So you have a perfect scenario where you have resilient demand, you have very little supply response, and so you are going to continue to see 20% plus earnings growth for probably the next 4 to 5 years at least.
Jeff?
It's my turn to agree with you, Dennis. I think when you, especially in Toronto and in Vancouver to some extent, you talk to the real estate folks, the developers, it's an ugly picture from their perspective. And as much as the current circumstances are challenging, I think if you think of it over a longer term period of time, there is a tremendous need, and affordability is still a major issue, and there'll be lots and lots of activity. It just doesn't feel like that right now.
Well, I know we're all getting older, but hopefully this panel kept you a little young. Thank you, Amanda, Kevin, Dennis, and JF for your insights and for going around the world here. We covered a lot in a short period of time. Thank you all for coming. It's been an honor to partner with you and the Canadian Club.
Good.
I'll echo David's thanks to our panelists. Thank you all so much. David, thank you for guiding today's rich and thoughtful discussion. We're really grateful to have all of your time today. Thank you again to EY and Scotiabank for sponsoring today's event, and to our partners at The Logic. Thank you for your support. A big thanks to VVC Live, our AV partners, for supporting today's event. And before we close, I invite you to join us on January 26th for a powerhouse panel on unlocking Canada's trade corridors. Please visit canadianclub.org for more information. Thank you all for joining us today. And we will see you soon. Thanks.